my son came to Jane, my wife and I, told us that he was gay, and that it was not a choice, and that that's just part of who he is, and he'd been that way ever since he could remember. And that launched an interesting process for me, which was kind of rethinking my position. I now believe that people ought to have the right to get married.
Republican Senator Rob Portman on his dramatic change of heart, reversing his position on gay marriage after his son told him he's gay. We'll get to that in a moment, but first let's introduce the roundtable. George Will, ABC's Matthew Dowd, former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina, Democratic Congressman Xavier Becerra, and Audie Cornish, host of NPR's All Things Considered. Welcome to all of you. I want to start with you, George Will. You heard what John Boehner said, which is probably not much of a surprise, still taking a very hard line on any new revenues, even if entitlement reform is offered. How do they break this stalemate, especially after the so-called charm offensive?
Well, first, any charm offensive that is labeled a charm offensive thereby loses some of its charm because it looks tactical. But beyond that, this week, while the charm offensive was going on, two budgets were produced. The Democrats, at long last, after 1,500 or so days, produced a budget in which Patty Murray, the chairman who produced this, said Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, and Social Security, the four drivers of our fiscal crisis, not a dime will be touched from them. The Republicans produced a budget under Paul Ryan, where Ryan said, and this is his so-called austerity, federal spending will grow 3.4% over the next decade. His radical idea is that in 2024, senior citizens will shop for health care. Imagine that. That's it. But you have two. Her budget hasn't the slightest chance of passing the House with a $1 trillion tax increase. Ryan's budget hasn't a prayer of a chance of passing the Senate because it depends on repeal of Obamacare. So what we need are some more elections.
Carly, it is really dueling budgets. No chance?
Well, I don't think either budget, as George suggests, represents a blueprint for a compromise. I continue to hold out hope that with pressure building, people on both sides of the aisle will actually step forward with some fundamental reform. We need fundamental tax reform, which if done right...
To make it simpler.
To make it simpler, but which if done right would raise revenues without raising rates. We need fundamental reform of some of our entitlements. And I guess the other thing, getting lost in this whole discussion is the reality that not every dollar spent by the federal government is spent wisely and well. We have lots of room to spend money more wisely and less of it.
Congressman Becerra, do you see hope? In talking to you, you see a little hope there.
I actually do. And I think
what is that based on?
Well, some of us are having conversations on other matters like immigration, which is perhaps more intractable than the budget. And I think there's a really good chance that we'll make progress there. But I also think that John Boehner, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, you name it, I think people, Americans, just want to see us move forward. And so I think they want to see us get something done. And so I think you're going to see a break in this stalemate soon. Now, you got to remember, if folks are going to talk about spending, you got to talk about the tax code, because the biggest spending we do is through the tax code. Over $1 trillion is spent every year through the tax code. It's all those loopholes. And so if you want to get rid of spending, you can't leave out all the stuff that's done through the tax code, where we give away all sorts of stuff to very small groups of special interest.
We actually agree on this.
Audie, okay, let's put you in the middle.
Listening to this with interest because, my theory
You've covered Congress.
I've covered Congress, and when it's quiet, when lawmakers are laying low, I think that sometimes that means conversations are actually happening, right? When people are flapping their wings against the cage and screaming into the microphones, it's because they don't feel heard, they don't have access, and they're not part of the discussions. So, and another thing to say about the charm offensive is, you've got a whole class of lawmakers who this is all they know, not having contact with the White House. I mean, maybe it is meaningful if there's follow-through for them to understand that, there have been administrations where there is contact, there is communication.
Well, and Matt, to me, that's, I think, one of the biggest faults I have of the president and all this. And we've had two presidents in a row who basically underutilized one of the most important powers of the presidency, which is the social power of the presidency. And this president, who actually called me and I met with in the aftermath of the horrible midterm elections that hurt the Democrats and helped the Republicans, and the number one thing I said to him was he had not used the power of the presidency in order to build relationships. What the president seems to do is go to somebody and be nice to him when he needs a vote from them. But he doesn't go to them and build a relationship and build a constant relationship. So when he needs a vote, it's there. And I think...
So you're saying too late on that?
Well, I think it's too little too late. I think it's great that he's doing it, but I wish it had started 4 or 5 years ago when he began the White House.
Of course, this week we had the conservative conference CPAC, which we were talking about with Speaker Boehner, and there was a real division on ideas for the future. Let's take a listen.
We're not here to put a fresh coat of rhetorical paint on our party. We're not here to abandon our principles in a contest of government giveaways. That's a game we will never, ever win.
Way too many people believe Republicans are anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-science, anti-gay. Many voters are simply unwilling to choose our candidates, even though they share our core beliefs, because those voters feel unloved, unwanted, and unwelcome in our party.
A lot of differences there, Carly. You were there. What do you see? What does all this mean?
Well, I think there, frankly, is way too much talk about the Republican Party, its future, its ideas. I think, honestly, most Americans don't care about the state of either party. What they care about is the state of their job, their family, their community. I think they're tired of thinking about the next election. We just finished an election. They put people to work. So, look, I think it's important whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I happen to be a Republican. I happen to be a conservative. I think what we need to do is talk about things that we think will work for the American people. Stop having all this political conversation and start having some real conversations about getting things done, making people's lives better.
George, will any stars come out of this for 2016 that we're all going to be paying attention to for the next 4 years that we already haven't started paying attention to?
First, here's the New York Times headline on the CPAC conference. GOP divisions fester at conservative retreat. Festering, an infected wound, it's awful. I guarantee you, if there were a liberal conclave comparable to this, and there were vigorous debates going on there, the New York Times headline would be, "Healthy diversity flourishes at liberal conclave." Republicans have been arguing, social conservatives and libertarian free market conservatives, since the 1950s when National Review was founded on the idea of a fusion of the two. It has worked before with Ronald Reagan. It can work again. What I did see at CPAC was the rise of the libertarian strand of republicanism, which has an effect in foreign policy, that is a pullback from nation building and other kind of ambitions abroad that they'd never countenance from government at home, and a sense of live and let live with subjects such as decriminalization of certain drugs and gay marriage.
Congressman, anybody make you nervous there for 2016? Looking ahead?
No, I think that
The whole thing makes me nervous.
what I see is a party that's in disarray, that's trying to figure out where it goes. And what was it, Senator McConnell, Republican Senator McConnell said, he doesn't want to be part of a crybaby caucus. And I think that what Republicans are trying to do is figure out what path they choose. Let them choose. Once they've decided, the American people want to know, where are we going to go? Let's go there as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats.
Audie, Marco Rubio, seen as a reformer, especially on immigration, but he didn't really even bring it up. Why not?
No, he didn't. And obviously, it's such a complicated thing. There were immigration panels and breakout sessions. This was a huge topic of conversation. Maybe he didn't want to be pigeonholed. Maybe, as one Latino conservative said last week, you can't expect Marco Rubio to win the Latino vote for you. And he's obviously staking out some ground there and trying to go with the traditional sort of three stools of the Republican Party.
Matt, you're just shaking your head. The whole thing, it makes you nervous. What do you think?
Well, to me, imagery and who's there and what you say is important. And I don't think divisions are a bad thing. I actually think that a conservative message that is built for the 21st century would be a good thing. CPAC, to me, reminds me of going to Land Before Time. And it's like going to a Flintstones episode, in my view.
Are you
it's
talking
like,
dinosaurs here?
No, it's like there are like a bunch of dinosaurs. Most of them are throwbacks in times. It's like who's running for Grand Poobah, the Loyal Order of Water Buffaloes, is what it looks like to me. When you have Sarah Palin, who is it's an amazing situation to me, between her and the Kardashians, I think you added up, between a Palin connection and the Kardashians, there's 10 reality shows that have been built around that. I don't think it's helpful to the Republican Party. I think there are some people, Marco Rubio in there, that who will become and are stars of the party. I think CPAC's time has come and gone, and it's time for somebody to put together a 21st century conservative agenda.
But what's wrong with hashing those ideas out publicly? I mean, what's wrong with having that conversation in a way that the public can see and understand that there is real conversation?
I just wouldn't do it in the Mesozoic era. That's what I think part of the problem is.
Let's move on to another big topic for the Republicans this week, and that stunning announcement by Rob Portman that he now supports same-sex marriage. Obviously, a personal decision for him, the only Republican senator to support same-sex marriage. George Will, does this go anywhere?
He will not be the last, because the demographic tide here is large, powerful, and exorable. As I've said on this program before, opposition to gay marriage is literally dying. It's an older demographic. And if you raise the question among young people, they're not interested. And I dare say this is one of the good things about CPAC, because you saw at CPAC, this is another division, and again, a healthy one. It's largely young people attend CPAC, and this is not at the top of their agenda. It's not even on their agenda.
But it might take a while for them to die out, though, George.
I think there's been an amazing, and George is right, it's amazing. In the last 10 years, I think there's been almost a 20-point change in people's perceptions of gay marriage in this country. I think Ron Portman is another domino in this whole effect. I think any Republicans that stand in the way of this are standing in the way of march of history on this. Rob Portman, I know well. I did debate prep with Rob Portman in years past. He's a good person. And the people that I think that have criticized him and said, oh, by the way, he only did it because it was a personal thing that affected him personally. He wasn't going to do it otherwise. To me, why do we criticize people for that? The person that started MAD, it was a personal thing. Many people that have come out against gun control have been personally affected by it. It doesn't, if somebody's path to the truth or somebody's path to a place where we actually think they're open and compassionate is a personal decision, God be with them.
I think, though, we have to be careful because John Boehner's views, which are different than Rob Portman's views, are equally sincere. And I think when we get into trouble on this debate, when we assume that people who support gay marriage are open and compassionate and people who don't are not, it's why I believe the right way to solve these very personal issues is to let people vote on them. Don't have judges decide it. Don't even have representative government decide it. Let people vote on it in the states. I think people of both points of view accept the democratic process. What they don't always accept is a bunch of self-important, self-appointed judges saying this is culturally the new norm.
Martha, it was not only welcome news that Rob made this statement, but I think it's part of this march on progress. But it seems like it's going to take Republicans so long, whether it's on immigration or rational gun safety laws or on trying to make sure that we focus on jobs, not on just deficit, to try to get Republicans to join the mainstream and be part of America in the 21st century, to say, let's move forward together.
Audie, quickly, if you will, is it generational from what you've seen on the Hill?
This was definitely met with a meh by people I know, and I do get
a
that.
meh?
Yeah, it's kind of like, maybe. But also, I think what's remarkable, you weren't seeing a lot of fits of outrage and very angry emails coming through from people on the other side of this. So maybe there's a shift going on regardless of what we think.
An historic week for the Catholic Church. Matt Dowd, I know you're so excited to talk about this. The first Pope from the Americas, Pope Francis. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you first,
Thank you.
Matthew Dowd.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody out there, Irish or non-Irish. To me, I think this is a really, really important moment. It was an important moment even before this Pope was chosen because of what's going on in the Catholic Church. These immense scandals that are happening, the lack of transparency, lack of openness, and many people thought lack of concern for the most poor and vulnerable in our society. Not only is he the most diverse pope that we've had in centuries and centuries, but the fact that he picked the name Francis, I think, is very pointed and very apropos. I mean, obviously, St. Francis from Assisi, who gave up all this wealth, and basically was told, in his mind, that he was told he needed to fix the church. And he went back, he was basically a friend of the environment, friend of animals, friend of the poor, friend of the vulnerable. And what the Pope has seemed to say, and he's told in his stories, is he picked the name because he wanted the church to be a poor church and of the poor. And even if the Pope doesn't make progress on the issues that many people think he needs to make progress on, certain social issues and on women maybe becoming priests. If he can make the church a more humble church and a church of more humility that focuses on the poor and vulnerable society, that'll be a huge advance.
Carly, just watching those ceremonies, what did you think?
You know,
100,000 people.
I know. And what struck me, I saw a picture of a man and his son in a church, I believe in Argentina, and they literally both fell to their knees when they heard the news. And for me, that was so touching because whether you're Catholic or not, I think what it reminds us is that people do believe in something larger than themselves, and if they don't believe, they want to believe. I thought it was a moment when so many people in the world were united in a sense of spirituality, whether they were Catholic or not.
Quickly,
Martha,
Congressman Becerra.
My parents pray the rosary every day at night. The son of immigrants, I'm the son of immigrants. I now see that the Pope is a son of immigrants, and in America, that may be an omen of what's to come about how we will treat immigrants, and I think that is phenomenal.
Thanks, all of you, for joining us. Great roundtable. A reminder, we'll have live coverage of the Pope's inaugural Mass on Tuesday.